This is the last gift I'll ever give you, my husband sneers, shoving divorce papers across the table. I've decided to marry someone else, so thanks for being my cash dispenser all these years. The man I've spent so many years with turns out to be a terrible person, and this is the story of my revenge. My name is Jessica, and I'm about to turn 50. Tomorrow is a significant day for me, not just because of my birthday, but because I will finally be free from the debt that has burdened me for so long. My husband, Lance, and I have worked hard together for the last 2 decades. We married when I was 30 and he was 35. He had inherited a liquor store from his parents, who had passed away while I was an office worker at the time. We met through a mutual acquaintance and quickly began dating, with marriage already in mind. But I had one concern. What if he asked me to run the store with him? At the time, I was working as a financial consultant, advising individuals and corporate clients on insurance and investment strategies. I earned a solid income and loved my job. I was even studying for certification to advance my career when Lance proposed to me. "I know you've been working hard to get that certification," he said. "I want to support you in any way I can. I have enough staff at the store to manage on my own, so you should continue pursuing your dreams." His reassurance was the final push I needed to marry him. He seemed kind, supportive, and genuinely on my side, just the kind of person I wanted to build a life with. So, as agreed, he focused on his business, and I focused on my career. We both thought our marriage was going well. But about a year into our marriage, everything changed. I was spending my day off at home while Lance was at work. As I vacuumed under the bed, the vacuum caught on a pile of papers. We had only been living in this house for 6 months, so I was surprised to find such a mess. Curious, I picked up a crumpled piece of paper and opened it. The bold letters at the top of the page hit me like a ton of bricks. Reminder of payment. The total amount of debt owed in Lance's name was $200,000. $200,000. My head started spinning. Why had he hidden such a massive debt from me? I confronted him as soon as he came home. "What is this debt? What's going on?" "It's not what you think," he said quickly. "It's debt left to me by my parents." The debt wasn't personal. It was tied to his liquor store, passed down from his parents along with the business. It was secured by the land and the house we lived in, so he had no intention of renouncing the inheritance. I understood that it wasn't his personal debt, but it was still something that couldn't be ignored. "But this is a payment reminder," I pointed out. "Aren't you paying it off every month?" "I am," he replied, "but sales fluctuate from month to month. Sometimes, during the slower months, I can't keep up with the payments. I have to pay my staff first, so I've asked the creditors to wait." That's when the letter came. At first, his explanation seemed reasonable, but delaying payments was clearly not a good idea, especially with a letter that included the words "final notice." "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to panic," he added quickly. "But don't worry, the business is on track and we haven't been evicted from the house, right?" "That's true, but—" I looked at him with concern. Then he brought up something unexpected. "If you're so worried, why don't you help me pay it off? You're making quite a bit, aren't you?" I hesitated, uneasy with the direction the conversation was taking. This was his store, not mine. But then he added, "We're husband and wife. We're supposed to help each other. My debt is your debt too." "That's a bit sudden," I replied, taken aback. "Are you okay with my store going out of business?" he asked. "A lot of people would suffer if it closed down, you know." He had a point. His store had become an essential part of the community. It was located in a suburban area with few other shops or supermarkets around. He sold fresh foods like meat and fish and even offered a home delivery service. I had visited the store several times, and it was always busy. Customers often mentioned how grateful they were to have it in the neighborhood. "Please, honey," he pleaded. "I'm focused on keeping the business running, but I need your help to pay off these debts." I respected his dedication to his work and the effort he put into the store. I didn't want to see it disappear. I didn't want that to happen at all. Being married means supporting each other through thick and thin, and if he was struggling, it seemed only natural for me to help him. "Okay," I agreed. "I'm repaying as much as I can every month from my salary," I assured him. "You can focus on managing the store." I could help financially, but only he could run the business. I was glad that he relied on me above all else. But that was the beginning of a change in him. About 3 years passed since I took over his debt. He started coming home late more often. "What were you doing so late? Drinking again?" I asked. "I just had a few drinks with some customers," he said casually. Did you make the payment this month? His tone was condescending, something I hadn't noticed before. I did, last week. Why? The store depends on you, so you'd better keep paying on time, he remarked. Whenever he got drunk, he began giving me orders. At first, I dismissed it as nonsense from a tipsy husband, but as it became a habit, it started to get under my skin. He made it seem as if it was normal for me to pay off his debt. By the way, Matt just had his third kid, he added one day. I envy him. Matt, his friend from high school, also owned a business. His wife worked in the store alongside him. I've been wanting to talk to you about that, I said, finally voicing what I had been holding in. Don't you think it's time for us to start a family? His reaction was cold and dismissive. What? A baby? My business is just starting to pick up and we're still in debt. How can we be so irresponsible? I held back my frustration. Matt has 3 children now, right? We can manage one too. His parents are still in good health, and his wife helps out at the store. They're different from us, he snapped, and I couldn't argue with that. But deep down, I had always thought I would have children. When I got married, my dream of starting a family was easily crushed. So, until I pay off all your debts, we can't have a baby? Well, I guess that's how it's going to be, he replied with a smirk. If you make a lot of money and pay off the debt quickly, I might think about it. His mean smile disgusted me, but I became determined to pay off the debts as soon as possible. How blind I was. Even though his demand was irrational, I was so fixated on the idea of starting a family that I didn't question it. From that point on, I worked tirelessly for Lance. I pursued additional qualifications, took promotional exams, and secured salary increases. I started earning much more than other women my age, even making advance payments on the debt. But the debt didn't disappear easily. Before I knew it, I turned 40, and I had to give up on having children. I told myself that as long as I still had my husband, it would be enough. He relied on me, and I was willing to do anything for him. As long as I believed that, I remained content. But Lance began coming home later and later as the days went by. Sometimes, he didn't come back until morning. I was working late at the store, and before I knew it, the sun was up, he would say. I convinced myself that he was working hard to protect the store, and that I needed to do my best as his wife too. We were in this together, striving for a better future. The months and years passed, and finally, the day arrived when I would make the last payment. I had sacrificed all sorts of luxuries for the sake of the debt, but now, I wouldn't have to anymore. I could finally spend my hard-earned money the way I wanted. As I reflected on everything, I realized just how much had changed since I got married. I had been so focused on money that we had never taken a vacation or even dined at a nice restaurant. Now that we were in our 50s, I hoped we could finally start enjoying those things. On the day the last payment was due, I took the day off. I cooked a more luxurious dinner than usual, prepared a bottle of wine, and even baked Lance's favorite chocolate cake. I wanted to celebrate our new debt-free life together. When he came home from work, I set everything on the table and said, "Finally, it's over. It feels like it's been a long time, but the last 20 years have gone by so fast, haven't they?" Lance was trembling, his head hung low. I wondered if he was overwhelmed with happiness. But as I stood there, stunned, he started laughing, an eerie, unfamiliar sound that sent a chill down my spine. "What the hell is going on? Are you okay?" I asked, bewildered. Then the man I thought was my husband said something outrageous. "You're dismissed now. I'm grateful to you for the past 20 years. Thanks to you paying off all my debt, I'm finally free. Great job. I don't need you anymore." "What are you talking about?" I asked, completely at a loss. With a smug expression, he pulled something out of his bag. "This is my last present to you." In bold letters, "Petition for divorce" stared back at me, stabbing at my heart. He continued, proudly, "I've decided to marry someone else, so you're no longer of any use to me. Thanks for being my cash dispenser until now." "You're getting remarried? Have you been cheating on me all this time?" I asked, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. I thought back to all the late nights, the excuses about work or socializing. While I was working hard to pay off his debt, he was. He kept that smug look on his face. "I've already found my next potential wife. I want to divorce you and marry her. That's why I've been waiting for you to clear my debt." Tears welled up in my eyes as the reality of his betrayal sank in. As I stared at the feast I had carefully prepared, the sight became a blur through my tears, adding to my sadness. He shoved the divorce papers at me and barked, "Get the hell out of here." My blood boiled. anger replacing the sadness and despair I had been feeling. Fine, but you'll regret it, I managed to say. Regret it? Why would I regret divorcing an old hag like you? He sneered. Old hag? If I was an old hag, then he was an old fool. Did he really think he was still young? The absurdity of his delusion made me regain my composure. Without another word, I took the divorce papers from him. I'm going to hold on to this for now. You'll hear from me soon, I said, packing my belongings and leaving the house. 20 years of marriage ended so easily. Once I was alone, the tears finally came, tears of emptiness and frustration. The next day, I contacted my attorney, had him draft a divorce agreement, and requested a full background report on his so-called bride-to-be. Not long after, I received a call from Lance. Jessica, what the hell is this document? He shouted, his voice furious. I could practically see his face turning bright red through the phone. I remained calm, in stark contrast to his rage. That's the divorce agreement. What's the problem? I know what it is. I'm talking about this loan agreement. Why do I have to pay you back? He sounded desperate, his voice rising with each word. This is insane. It's not right. He was referring to the clause about repaying the money I had spent on his behalf during our marriage. You decided to help out of your own goodwill. Why are you digging up the past now? His frantic protests only confirmed what I had known all along. He never thought I'd stand up for myself. But now, I was done being used. What do you mean? He stammered. You did it as my wife. That was then, I replied coldly. But once we divorce, it's a different story. The regret I had hinted at earlier suddenly dawned on him. He had never considered that I might demand repayment. The moment he asked for a divorce, I had immediately thought about making him pay back every cent I'd spent on his behalf. Given my work in insurance and investments, I often dealt with clients facing divorce or inheritance issues. Thanks to that, I had the contacts of several experienced attorneys whom I consulted right away. The total amount, including interest, came to just over $300,000. I was determined to have him pay back every penny. That was all I wanted. Seeing my unwavering stance and the name of a well-known local attorney on the documents, he must have realized how serious this was. He had thought he could get rid of me without paying alimony, a laughable idea. You know I don't have much money, he muttered. Then why don't you sell the store to fund it? I suggested. If I do that, I'll have nothing left. You're 55, right? You could still find another job if you wanted to. Give me a break, he grumbled, his voice filled with desperation. Our conversation was going nowhere, and I was tempted to hang up. But there was one last thing I wanted to ask. By the way, how's it going with your new bride-to-be? That's none of your business, he snapped. I burst out laughing at his brusque attitude. Sounds like you're really going through it. Good luck with that, I said, ready to hang up. Wait, he blurted out. I've decided not to marry her. We can start over. For some reason, he was pleading with me now. I shot back my final words before slamming the phone down. Start over. Don't kid yourself. I don't want you. I couldn't believe I had spent 20 years married to this man. I wondered if others saw me as more ridiculous than him. Until the divorce, I had genuinely respected him, watching him work tirelessly for the store and his customers. I wanted to support him. But 20 years later, I realized he was just a fool. His talk of remarriage was nothing but a self-indulgent fantasy. It all started when he innocently flirted with a teenage university student who worked part-time. You're so cute, Melissa. Will you be my wife? He'd asked. She played along, jokingly replying, well, I might think about it if you let me be a full-time housewife. The truth was, he thought she was serious. To her, the idea of marrying a man nearly 40 years her senior was nothing more than a joke. When he persistently pressed her to marry him, she was horrified. Her parents had to intervene and place a restraining order against him. When I read the report from the private investigator, I laughed so hard I nearly hyperventilated. All those late nights he came home, I thought he was working hard. I had no idea. Instead, he was hitting on young girls at his favorite bars and strip joints, making a fool of himself by saying things like, I'm surprisingly popular with young girls. I'm a salesman, so I have this easygoing aura. They say I look younger. Don't you think so? The girls apparently cringed at his comments. He no longer saw any value in his old wife and viewed me only as a cash dispenser. But his delusions were laughable. No one took him seriously, and he ended up as a sad, almost stalker-like figure who nearly got into trouble with the police. Honestly, it might have been easier if he had just cheated on me, but he couldn't even manage to find a mistress. His obsession with marrying a young girl stemmed from the fact that his friend Matt had a grandchild. Matt had told me the story himself. As soon as he saw my grandchild, he said he wanted to have a child of his own. I scolded him, telling him he had no right to speak that way, especially after I had spent years paying off his debt. I was harsh, but I had no idea he had stooped so low. He was absolutely mortified. I'm glad I didn't waste my golden years with that man, I muttered to myself. My divorce was finalized, and since the division of our property wasn't clear-cut, he had some room to negotiate for his own benefit. However, he quickly gave up just because my attorney was well known. I couldn't believe how such a gutless person had managed to stay in business all that time. In the end, he sold the store to pay me back. Thankfully, his employees had already left before he sold it, so they weren't affected by his misfortune. Many customers were shocked and frowned upon him for giving up the business his parents had passed down to him. When they learned the reason was to pay off his ex-wife, the news spread like wildfire, and it almost sounded like a comedy. Even if he hadn't sold the store, the bad publicity would have eventually ruined his business. In a way, it was probably for the best that he sold it before he went bankrupt. The money from the sale wasn't enough to cover his debt, so he continues to work part-time jobs to pay me back to this day. Occasionally, I still get messages from him. It was all my fault. Can we get back together? I was out of my mind because Matt was showing off his grandkid. Even after I blocked his number, he kept calling from different phones. Eventually, I had my attorney warn him that if he continued contacting me, we'd file a restraining order. The calls finally stopped. As usual, he's terrified of the attorney. By the way, guess what I do for work now? I'm a marriage counselor. Just as I turned 50 and felt the need for a change, a friend of mine opened a matchmaking business. I quit my previous job and joined her. Now, I help singles find their match and provide advice on financial issues between couples, including how to manage insurance and other matters. It's been a hit, and our membership has grown quickly. Couples who want to have honest and thorough discussions from the start appreciate our unique service. Having gone through so much myself, I don't want others to make the same mistakes I did. Although my salary is a little lower than before, I genuinely enjoy helping others find happiness every day. I found my happiness after letting go of my ex-husband, and now I'm doing my best to be a bridge to someone else's happiness.
I wish my wife could just stay buried. Then, all of Amy's assets would be mine, and I could live carefree every day.
Wow, that's so low, Nathan.
Don't worry. Eventually, everything will be yours since you'll outlive her. That's the advantage of marrying older women. True. After all, I took her in, so I should get some perks. As I listened to my husband and his family's inappropriate remarks about my late father, something broke inside me. I left the room in silence. I stepped outside. I took a deep breath of the cold air, and I made a life-changing decision. My name is Amy Stamper, a 29-year-old stay-at-home wife. I currently live with my husband Nathan, who's 3 years younger than me, in a house in the suburbs. I first met Nathan at a wedding of a mutual friend. I wasn't particularly close to the bride, but she insisted I come, so I couldn't refuse. Since we didn't share many friends, it was more like I was there to make up the numbers. I went quietly congratulating the bride while chatting politely with the other guests. After the reception, I was about to head home when someone called out to me from behind. "Excuse me, could I talk to you for a moment?" Surprised, I turned around to see a young man out of breath, Nathan. Though his sudden approach startled me, his sincerity persuaded me to stay. At first, I didn't see him as a romantic prospect. After all, he was 3 years younger, which felt too young for me at the time. Unaware of my hesitation, Nathan enthusiastically shared many things about himself. He worked at a securities firm and aimed to move into management. His youthful ambition and drive felt refreshing, and I gradually became interested in him. From that day, Nathan started reaching out more frequently. At first, we'd go for casual dinners or movies, but his steady interest never wavered. Although I felt uneasy about our age gap, his sincerity gradually won me over. Nathan was sensitive to my feelings. always taking things at my pace without pressuring me. Then one day, he confessed his feelings in a serious tone. "Amy, I know you're concerned about our age difference, but you're the one I want. No matter our age or how far apart we are, I want to be with you." His words went beyond simple affection, showing a genuine commitment to our future together. In that moment, the age barrier I had put up crumbled. Nathan's determination moved me deeply. We started dating, and 6 months later, he proposed. I accepted his proposal without hesitation. I could clearly see a future with him. Marrying Nathan marked a significant turning point in my life. With marriage, I transitioned to being a stay-at-home wife, and my life changed drastically. The biggest change was moving in with my in-laws, as we began living in Nathan's childhood home. Living with us were Nathan's mother, Emma, a stay-at-home mom, and his younger sister, Mary, a college sophomore. Initially, we planned to find a place of our own, but soon after, Nathan suggested we live with his family. Nathan's father had passed away a few years prior, leaving his mother and sister to manage the home alone. Though independent, they both struggled with the absence of a steady presence in the home. As the eldest son, Nathan felt it was his duty to step up and support them. His dedication to his family made a strong impression on me. Though I had reservations, I respected Nathan's wishes and agreed to live with his family. I wanted to support Nathan's desire to care for his family, and I believed building connections with his family was important for our future together. Living with Nathan's family took some adjustment, but gradually I settled into the new routine. Nathan made an effort to support me, balancing his busy work schedule while helping me communicate with his family. Yet despite this, I often felt a heavy weight in my heart, especially when interacting with my mother-in-law, Emma. Emma, now in her 60s, was generally cheerful and friendly, but her comments often had a sharp edge. She would say things in a lighthearted tone, yet I couldn't help but feel a sting each time. At first, it was over something minor as dinner. One evening, I decided to try a new recipe, hoping the family would enjoy it. Nathan and Mary often complimented my cooking, so I thought a fresh twist would be welcome. But Emma's reaction took me by surprise. "This soup isn't as good as usual." She frowned slightly and put down her spoon. My whole body tensed. "Oh, I'm sorry. I tried a different seasoning. Did it not taste right?" I smiled, trying to brush it off, but deep down, I was filled with worry. Emma continued in her usual light-hearted tone. "No, it doesn't suit my taste. I think your usual light soup is better. I thought you were supposed to be a good cook, but maybe your creativity is lacking." "I'm still learning." I kept a bright expression, but her words left a dull ache in my heart. Though Emma didn't mean it unkindly, I couldn't shake the hurt each time she made these remarks. "I'm the straightforward type, so please don't take it the wrong way." She would say this often, unaware of how much her words affected me. One evening, I shared my feelings with Nathan after he came home from work. "Your mom can be really harsh sometimes. I know she doesn't mean any harm, but it still gets me down." Nathan considered my words, then tried to reassure me gently. "That's just how she is. She may come across strong, but she genuinely relies on you, which is why she says those things." His words helped a little, but the uncertainty in my heart didn't fully lift. I often wondered if I would ever find a way to connect with Emma without feeling overwhelmed by her comments. Living with Emma was challenging enough, but there was someone else who often tested my patience, Mary, Nathan's sister. At 20, Mary was bright and cheerful, often filling the house with her lively personality. However, her playful pranks were sometimes more than I could handle. Shortly after moving in, I realized how mischievous she could be. One day, while I was folding laundry, a sudden, ear-piercing bang sounded behind me. Startled, I let out a scream, only to turn around and see Mary grinning with a confetti popper in her hands.
Did I surprise you?
"You think?" My heart nearly stopped. "Please don't do that."
Well, I don't know. Your reaction was hilarious, though."
I tried to protest, but Mary just giggled, clearly amused by her prank. Her antics continued over time. She would switch off the bathroom lights while I was showering, or surprise me with fake bugs. The worst prank happened when she pretended Nathan had been in a car accident. With a solemn expression, she handed me her phone and told me in a somber voice,
Amy, the police just called. They said my brother was hit by a truck and is in the hospital.
"What? That can't be. Hello? Hello? This is Amy, Nathan's wife. I heard my husband was in an accident." But there was only silence on the other end, followed by uproarious laughter. I turned around to see Mary clutching her stomach in hysterics.
Amy, you really thought it was real? Seriously? As if the police would call me first.
Wait, all of this was a joke?
Yeah, joke's on you.
She laughed as I sank to my knees, overwhelmed by relief and disbelief. That evening, I finally confided in Nathan about Mary's pranks. "Nathan, Mary's pranks are getting to be too much. Today, she pretended you were in an accident." "An accident? Mary did that? I'll talk to her, but honestly, that's just how she's always been." Nathan laughed it off, though I could hardly see the humor. In that moment, I realized he wasn't going to take my concerns seriously. Realizing I couldn't rely on Nathan to address Mary's antics, I resolved to find my own ways to cope with her behavior. One day, a major disaster struck a neighboring town. The news covered scenes of destroyed homes, closed roads, and people huddled in shelters. Watching these heart-wrenching images, I felt a wave of sadness and sympathy. But Nathan's reaction was a shock. "Whoa, this looks like a movie set. They really got some good shots here." I stared at him in disbelief, unable to comprehend his detached response. And then Emma chimed in with a casual comment that left me speechless.
"Wish it would flood around here so we could get insurance money and rebuild the house."
My heart sank even further as I watched their indifference to the real suffering happening around us. Mary joining the conversation throughout her own absurd ideas.
"If we're rebuilding, let's make it a 3-story mansion with a pool and a barbecue area. Wouldn't that be great?"
"Don't get ahead of yourself, Mary. Maybe start with a basic emergency kit instead. Food prices might go up, you know."
"Emergency supplies? How boring."
Sitting there, listening to their nonchalant chatter, I felt hollow. To them, this disaster was merely an inconvenience or a distant event. While I couldn't stop thinking about the people who had lost everything, just as I was coming to terms with the vast difference between us, I received a devastating phone call. My father had passed away. It felt surreal. He had been ill, but his passing came far too soon. At his funeral, I barely spoke, clinging to my mother as she wept uncontrollably. My older brother Mike took charge of the arrangements, guiding us all through the overwhelming grief. Nathan and his family attended, but I noticed they only stayed on the sidelines, treating it as if it were merely another obligation. The grief of losing my father was already unbearable. What happened afterward broke me completely. When I finally returned home, drained emotionally and physically, I heard voices from the living room. Nathan, Emma, and Mary were laughing and chatting as if it were any other day.
"So, Amy's dad must have left her some decent inheritance, right?"
The casual way he spoke about my father's passing left me frozen in the hallway. "She's probably inheriting some property at least. Talk to her brother, Nathan. Make sure she gets a good share. Imagine how easy life would be with that rental income." I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
"Forget managing properties. Why not use this money for something fun? I've always wanted to go on a world cruise. We could do it, right?"
"Actually, yeah, that sounds great. And I'd love to finally book first-class flights."
"Let's go all out. I'll book the best hotels." Their callous conversation left me feeling numb. My father had just passed, and all they could think about was what his death could mean for them financially. But Nathan's next words cut deeper than anything else.
"If only Amy would pass away too. Then all that money would be mine, and I'd be set for life."
Mary gasped, then giggled.
"Oh my God, Nathan, that's so awful."
"Well, he is right. He'll likely outlive her anyway. That's the perk of marrying an older woman."
"Exactly. I took in a woman past her prime. A little reward wouldn't hurt."
I felt something inside me crumble, and a cold clarity took over. Without a word, I turned and walked out the door, inhaling the crisp night air to calm myself. But no amount of deep breathing could dispel the heavy feeling of betrayal and loss. I had tried to make things work, to respect Nathan's family for his sake. I had endured Emma's cutting remarks and Mary's relentless pranks. But this, listening to them plot to use my father's death for personal gain, and to suggest that I was merely a financial asset, I couldn't accept it. With the clearest resolve I'd ever felt, I realized that I couldn't continue living in this house. I had to leave Nathan and his family, for my own peace and my father's memory. Not knowing where else to go, I found myself at the train station, phone in hand. My brother Mike was the only person I trusted, the only one who might understand. Taking a deep breath, I sent him a message. "Mike, I need to come home. Can we talk?" After sending the message, I felt a small sense of relief, a glimmer of hope. A few moments later, Mike replied, his words lifting a weight off my shoulders.
"Of course, Amy. Come home whenever you need. I'm here."
Tears filled my eyes as I read his response. With Mike's support, I knew I could finally face the truth. The next day, I returned to Nathan's family home one last time, this time accompanied by Mike. I had told Mike everything the previous night about Nathan's family's heartless comments, their constant disrespect, and my decision to leave. Mike listened without interruption, nodding in understanding and encouraging me to make whatever choice would bring me peace. Now, standing at the front door, with him beside me, I felt a strength I hadn't felt in a long time.
"Amy, remember, this is your life. Just say what you need to say, and we'll leave together."
"Thank you, Mike." I rang the doorbell, and Nathan opened it, visibly surprised to see us standing there together.
"Amy, Mike, what's going on?"
I took a deep breath and, steadying my voice, spoke directly to Nathan. "Nathan, I can't live like this anymore. I want a divorce." The room fell silent. Nathan looked at me in shock, processing my words.
"Wait, what? Divorce? Where is this coming from?"
"I overheard your conversation last night about my father's inheritance. I've been trying for so long to be a part of this family, but last night was too much. You showed me that I'm just a means to an end for you, nothing more." Nathan looked around uncomfortably, clearly grasping the severity of the situation. "Now wait a minute, Amy. You've misunderstood. We were only joking last night. There was no harm meant in what we said. Surely you're overreacting." "Yeah, you just lost your dad. Maybe you're not thinking straight." Their excuses sounded hollow, and I could feel Mike bristle beside me. "Whether you were joking or not, your words cut deep. I can't stay in a family that treats me and my father's memory this way." Nathan turned to me with desperation in his eyes, reaching for any way to salvage the situation.
"Amy, please don't do this. We can talk it out. I didn't mean anything by it."
But I felt nothing for him anymore. No attachment, no sympathy. At that moment, Mike intervened.
"Nathan, Amy has made up her mind. Trying to convince her otherwise is pointless. Also, as you know, I'll be taking over my father's company. This means I'll be ending our business relationship as well." "What? But we can keep business and personal life separate, can't we?" "Business relationships are built on trust, and right now, there's none left to give."
Nathan was speechless, his face paling as he realized the weight of Mike's words. For years, my father had trusted Nathan's firm to manage our family's finances. Now, that trust was irrevocably broken. Mike continued with calm confidence, underscoring the finality of his decision.
"We'll be moving all our assets to a different firm. I'll have the paperwork sent to you this week."
Nathan, visibly distressed, looked from Mike to me, panic flashing across his face.
"Amy, please, I can't lose you, or this account."
"It's too late, Nathan. My decision is final. I deserve a life with respect and peace. Goodbye." I turned and walked away, not looking back, knowing that this was the start of a new chapter. In the weeks that followed, Mike helped me finalize the divorce, bringing closure to a painful part of my life. Nathan, stripped of his business account and abandoned by his family, suffered the consequences of his actions. His company reputation took a hit, and he was reassigned to a small branch far from the city. Emma and Mary also faced consequences, expecting a windfall from my father's estate they had spent extravagantly, only to find themselves in debt. Unable to repay the loans they'd taken, Emma was forced to work part-time, a shock for a woman who had never worked a day outside her home. Meanwhile, I had started rebuilding my life, feeling more confident than ever. I was reconnected with an old manager from a previous job who offered me a position back in the workforce. Grateful for the opportunity, I accepted. It felt like fate, giving me a fresh start just when I needed it most. I finally felt free to live on my own terms and build a future filled with happiness and dignity. This was the beginning of a new journey, one that I would walk with a clear heart, grateful for the family that truly stood by me.